Hello everyone, Moose here, and today I wanted to make this video to share something with you that I've been practicing consistently for the past 2 years, and I can say that this thing has helped me tremendously in my life in general, especially in terms of peace and tranquility. So I can say that it has overall improved my quality of life over the past 2 years. It is a really easy thing to apply in your life. It's a tiny shift of perspective, and I promise you, once you do that, you will feel a very strong impact in your life immediately. Stick to the end and I'll show you a quick exercise to apply it right now, cost-free, and you can see for yourself. What I want to share with you is a Stoic principle, or you can say a mental model called negative visualization, that has been prescribed and used a lot by Stoic philosophers such as Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and my favorite, Seneca. So what is Stoicism? Stoicism is an ancient Greek school of philosophy founded by Zeno of Citium in Athens. The school taught that virtue is the highest good, as in the ultimate goal of life, and he who reaches that would ultimately reach peace and tranquility. It advocates that the wise man lives in harmony with nature and is indifferent to pleasure and pain and any vices of fortune. So where did this idea originate? So the Craonic philosophers, who would later become Epicureans based on the teachings of Epicurus, are thought to have originated this practice, and they were hedonists by nature, which is quite different than the Stoic philosophy, but they did have that in common. The Stoics adopted that idea and that strategy and named it premeditatio malorum in Latin, which would become in English the premeditation of evil. It became famous in the Stoic world thanks to Seneca with the publication of the Moral Epistles, or letters from a Stoic. Okay, so what is negative visualization? Essentially, it is a practice that involves concentrating on every aspect in your life, whether in the present moment or in future events, and trying to think of the negative situations that you could be put in, all the negative scenarios. You try to make these scenarios in your head. So it's a meditative practice that consists of contemplating and visualizing negative scenarios. So at first sight, you can think it is a really depressing idea. It's a recipe for an anxiety attack, but not at all. That is not the objective. The objective is to be prepared and is to appreciate and to understand the nature of things, that everything goes by and nothing necessarily stays forever. So the whole idea of negative visualization is to prepare yourself, prepare your mind in order to better endure any adversities that you will face in your life, because you'll definitely face some. So if I would to summarize the essence of negative visualization, for me would be prepare, appreciate, and become aware of the situation. So these main three words for me explain really or highlight the essence of this Stoic mindset, or this Stoic principle, and we'll get into that in a second. Here is a quote that I think is quite complete, that explains well the essence also of negative visualization. Negative visualization, in other words, teaches us to embrace whatever life we happen to be living and to extract every bit of delight we can from it. But it simultaneously teaches us to prepare ourselves for changes that will deprive us of the things that delight us. It teaches us, in other words, to enjoy what we have without clinging to it." End quote. So why is it relevant? Why is negative visualization an important tactic for us to use today to strengthen our mindset? Why is it even more relevant today than any other time? So in today's world, we have a problem of being really complacent, of not appreciating anything that we have in our lives and taking everything for granted. Everything for us now is a given. Even if you take a minute and think about your life, a lot of the things that you currently have and you are currently using every single day were dreams of yours or objectives not long ago. And nowadays, once you've achieved these dreams, you take them for granted, you don't appreciate them, you don't have a sense of gratitude, and sometimes even you can catch yourself complaining about trivial things or insignificant details in your daily life, and you get really consumed in the details and you forget sometimes to look at the bigger picture. So the German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer, in his book The World as Will and Representation, describes that process perfectly by giving the parallel of a vicious cycle. It starts with a desire, and once you acquire or achieve that desire or your objective, you no longer want it, and then you want to fill the void that you feel by another desire. So when you have a desire, when you're pursuing it, there is something you're striving for. Once you achieve that something, you go back to your sad state and you need to fill the void with something else. And for him, this is why we are doomed to always be sad. But also, he was a quite pessimistic philosopher. So we're not really gonna dive into his theory or his philosophy, but this is I thought was a good parallel for us to understand the whole process of we want something, we achieve it, we no longer want it, and then we want something else, and it's just a vicious, never-ending cycle. And from a more psychological perspective, Philip Brickman and Donald Campbell, in their essay, coined the term hedonic treadmill or hedonic adaptation, and this is the exact same thing of Arthur Schopenhauer, but from a more psychological perspective, that we have a baseline, let's say, of happiness, and regardless of the event, whether it's positive or negative, we can go up in happiness or down, and then we, with time, we will eventually go back to baseline. So the up describes a positive event, a new job, a new car, a new house, and then the negative event could be also anything, an accident, you lost something, you lost a person, etc. And no matter what happens in our lives, we have that possibility and that capability of adaptation and adapting our levels of happiness to go back to baseline. There's also a very interesting paper by Shane Frederick and George Lowenstein that I will put in the description, and they perfectly explain the whole process from a psychological perspective, and they give, for me, a very good example for lottery winners. When they did a study on lottery winners and the people that had a traumatic experience, they found that with time they both have the same level of happiness. So whether you've won the lottery, which is an enormous amount of money without necessarily doing any effort, or you've lost your limbs in a traumatic accident, with time you both groups had the same level of happiness. And the last point, if you are interested from a more neurobiological perspective, like really to get from a scientific point of view, I will link a video of Andrew Huberman. He's a famous YouTuber, a doctor of Stanford University, that does a lot of scientific videos on dopamine, other topics as well, but the video on dopamine is literally the scientific explanation from a neurobiological perspective of the hedonic adaptation and the hedonic treadmill as described by the previous authors that I've just mentioned. So how do we apply negative visualization today in our lives to improve our lives in general and to stop this vicious cycle and start to appreciate our lives more and have more gratitude? So the main application now of negative visualization is to divide it in two applications. You have the current situation, everything that is happening right now in the present, everything that you possess, and everything that you're going to do in the future. For the former, I think the best way to apply negative visualization is to take a moment, contemplate on everything that you have, whether it's relationships, any material possessions, your health, your relationships in general, anything that you possess, and think of losing it, and think of all the consequences that will entail. So let's say, for example, you live far away from the city, you have a car. Every day you complain about your car, you want a better car, etc. You want to upgrade, but if you take a moment and think that you no longer have that car and everything that entails, so you're gonna wake up extra early to take the bus might not come, the bus is so slow, you might not find a seat, you might get late to work, and every single thing that will lead to And just by thinking that, by doing that exercise on every single aspect on your life, you'll definitely start to appreciate your car more, because you're so caught up in your lives that you don't necessarily think how much these things help you and how much you should be appreciative of these things. I'm not saying that we take everything for granted, because this is definitely also not the case, but we tend to take a lot of things. So you have the example of the car, a simple gadget that you possess, a phone, a vehicle, a relationship, for example. Think of a group of friends that you don't necessarily appreciate from on a day-to-day basis. Think of your life without them. When you hang out with them on the weekends, how much you enjoy spending time with them. And then when you have that mindset of, I can lose what I have, you will start to put yourself in a more appreciative mindset. And then the second application would be for future events. Before you do anything major, not before you go daily, for example, to work, but before an important meeting or before a presentation, when you catch yourself really stressing before an event, or really anxious, and you're really making it, you're exaggerating the importance of an event. Just when that happens, just take a moment, take a deep breath, think of it realistically. What's the worst case scenario? What could happen if it's a presentation? What could happen? You can stutter a bit. The PowerPoint might not work. They might not like it and have a negative feedback at the end. But that's it. That's all that could happen. You're stressing, you're wasting all that precious energy of yours over something that not only is not necessarily in your control, but it's not that big of a deal. And when you do that, it's not to dismiss or to ignore the reality of things, but just to understand the real weight of things, to understand the real impact of things. At the end of the day, it's just a presentation, and at the end of the day, it's just a job. When you put everything in perspective, your demeanor changes. You come at ease. You're more at ease in everything you do, and that gives a lot of space for creative energy to be put in everything you do. And that will definitely show by just your presence and your demeanor, that will completely change from just an anxious person and an overly stressed person to someone who's laid back and who knows what they're capable of. To give you a concrete example of this application, I have 9 to 5 job as a sales representative, and I catch myself sometimes before doing important sales calls really stressing and trying to think of every single detail to better prepare it. And when I catch myself doing that, I just take a moment, take a deep breath, and I apply this principle. And I think it helps me a lot to, again, put everything in its place. What's the worst thing that could happen? We might not have the same energy during the call. The person might not have the need, might not have the budget. The timeline might not be adapted. The need, or in general, might not be adapted to the product I'm selling. And then what? There will definitely be other sales calls and definitely other people that would need the product. I've had a lot of good sales calls, a lot of bad sales calls, and so what? Like, it goes on and it's the same thing. It's repetitive cycle, so there's no point to stress. And by doing that, by thinking of every single thing that could go bad in advance, I prepare myself. I come in really prepared. And I know that whether it's good, whether it's bad, I'm okay with the outcome. I'm just going to do what I can do, what I have to do. I'm going to do my job, and the rest is not necessarily in my control. So what are really the benefits of this principle? Does it really help? Like, concretely, does it really help? Or it's just gonna increase your anxiety and make you think that single thing would go back in your life? Here are the things that I've realized has changed completely in my life since I've started applying this principle. And the first thing is making me always prepared. No matter what, no matter the circumstances, it makes you really prepared. And nothing can shock you and nothing can disappoint you. Again, if I take the example of the sales call, if you don't do the exercise and the sales call goes bad, you're going to be completely shattered. If you were really hoping for it to go well, it will really shatter you and it will really impact your motivation in general, your mood, and it would have a dramatic snowball effect on many other aspects in your life. It could even impact other sales goals because you're not in the same, you don't have the same motivation, the same fire. So when you know that it could not lead to a deal and it could fail, you don't have any expectations. You already thought about it. You think everything through before it happens. So you project the fears and the negatives in advance. It's not that you're going to overcomplicate things. You're just going to think of the real things that could happen in advance. As simple as that. Seneca said, "Fortune falls heavily on those for whom she's unexpected. The one always on the lookout easily endures." Again, it's just a proof of what we're just saying. The one on the lookout, the one who knows the worst case scenario, is never really that impacted by anything. And even if you want to take that step further, it's not also only in your personal life. If you think about any business, they do what we call in the business world the SWOT analysis. The objective is to identify the strength, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats. So opportunities and threats, this is exactly negative visualization. You just think of everything in the market in general, in your vertical or in your segment, all the opportunities and all the threats. So the threats are exactly what we're talking about, all the possible negative scenarios that could happen. And they always brainstorm about possible people, like coming up with different services or lowering the prices, etc. The objective is to keep your business and your activity healthy and be ready for any market changes, because when you're in an open market, anything could happen. You can never predict the future, so you always need to be ready. And that's just the idea of brainstorming on negative or even positive opportunities. The second thing is creative perspective. When you think about everything in depth and in advance, it gives you a lot of time to really go deep, and it gives you a creative edge because you think of all the possible blockers or all the possible worst case scenarios, and you take the time to think of how can you bypass them, because they might happen. And when they happen, you need to find a solution. So you're thinking in advance of all the possible solutions for all the potential problems, and you're preparing yourself. Take a really simple example. You're doing your presentation and the PowerPoint is not working. If you haven't thought about it in advance, you'll be blocked. You'd have to think on the spot. You might have been already put in this situation, so you know what to do. But if it's your first time, you wouldn't know necessarily what to do. But if you think about it, you have, for example, another PDF on your USB cable. You'll save another file, for example, on your email, etc. You'll prepare. It will give you time to think outside of the box and to always have a solution for any problem that might happen. The third point is embracing nature and embracing the fact that everything changes. Nothing is forever and everything is just momentary. Marcus Aurelius, the famous Roman emperor and a devoted Stoic, journaled his inner thoughts and reflections in his famous book Meditations, and you can see a recurrent theme in the book of him reminding himself of the transitory nature of life and the inevitable loss of many of his possessions, whether it was his title as a Roman emperor or everything else that he possessed in general. And for him, the idea of embracing the impermanence of all things, he was better prepared to cherish the present moment and not take anything for granted. In his book, he says, "Never say of anything I've lost it, but say I have returned it." And that perfectly explains the mindset that he was in, that there's no such thing as ownership. What you possess today, you can easily lose tomorrow. And even when you die, you will definitely lose it. So there is no such thing as this is mine and I should just take that for granted, whether it's personal relationships, material possessions, health, anything in life. So having that mindset pushes you to practice healthy detachment of things or of people. It's never good to be overly dependent on something or someone. It's always very healthy to keep a certain healthy distance between you, even in relationships or even in relation to material possessions. It's never, for example, healthy to base your happiness on an object, because that object is definitely not going to stay with you forever. So it's always good to understand that what I'm using today, what I'm really happy using or happy owning, I can lose anytime. And that mindset makes you keep a distance between everything, but really a healthy distance. It's not about being really distant from people and pushing people away, but it's also about understanding true boundaries in terms of healthy attachment or detachment. The last point for me is appreciating life more in general, appreciating the little things. I'm, for example, a coffee lover. I really love to drink coffee. And I catch myself sometimes not enjoying that at all, knowing that a few years ago for me that was a really sacred ritual that I really loved doing. And nowadays it's just a completely mundane activity that I do without even paying attention. And by doing that, I'm just losing some of the things that really made me happy. So when I do the negative visualization exercise, I understand, okay, when I take all the activities in my day and I understand that some of them are really taken for granted, and then it helps me enjoy everything. A gym session, for example, that I really enjoy, sometimes I go through it just as a duty, but in reality it should be a fun activity. It should be a fun time. You should be having fun in the gym if that's what you like. If you're making YouTube videos, you should really be enjoying the process. You shouldn't take it as a duty, or you shouldn't take it as just I'm gonna do it because I have to do it. Enjoy the process, because you might not be able to do it tomorrow, and in that case it would be really a pity that you haven't enjoyed it as much as you could have. So again, to finish the video, I just want to stress a point. It's not about stressing yourself. It's not about making yourself anxious and always thinking of the negatives in everything. It's just a meditative exercise that you should do from time to time on a specific situation. It's not a full-on mindset that you should adopt. For me, by default, I think you should be positive in general. You should have, in general, a quite positive outlook. Before a presentation, you should know that you will do well because you're well prepared. Before anything that you encounter or you do in your life, you should know what you're capable of doing. And that's a really strong mindset to put yourself in. However, take the time to think of the negatives to prepare yourself, but not the other way. Not always be thinking about the negative. Just always be positive, but take the time to think about the negatives so you're not disappointed, so you're not shocked, so you're better prepared overall. So guys, the video is coming to the end. I really hope you've enjoyed this video, and I also hope that you learned something and that you're gonna apply this principle in your life. Don't forget, don't stress yourself. It's all about taking pleasure in the little things in your life. Learning about Stoicism in general would help you understand that a lot of things are completely outside of our control, and it's really wise to be able to make that distinction of what's in your control and what's outside of your control. And that is called, according to the Stoics, the dichotomy of control, and would be the topic of our next video. So stay tuned and have a good day. Thank you for watching.